Yeah, man, I think Steve Austin was always going to be a star. Nobody could ever, I think, imagine what kind of star he was going to, how big a star he was going to be. But I do remember Steve being very ambitious. I remember Steve soaking everything in. And you hear that a lot, but what I mean is Steve would watch the matches, every match from start to finish, with the exception of the match he had to work, obviously. But yeah, I remember Steve as being very aware of what he wanted to do. He just had to find that vehicle to get there, and eventually he obviously did. So I had a lot of fun with Steve, man. We'd go to the gym. We used to I remember when a friend of ours left and went to Puerto Rico and left us his 1978 Tercel that had no air conditioning, and the radio was crap, and we'd go driving down the road to Evansville or Louisville, and with the windows down, our shirts off, Steve's hair blowing in the wind, my hair blowing, sweating, passing people going, yeah, look at us, we're big stars. But yeah, man, Steve was a cool guy back then. He's even cooler now. He's one of those guys that the only thing that changed was his destiny and his superstardom. It never went to his head, even today, I think.
Could you see the potential of him to be a superstar even in those days?
I could see a lot of potential in Steve in those days because he was relentless. He was relentless in the gym. He was relentless in learning. We had a conversation one time going down the road, Steve and Brian Lee, and I don't know what started it, but it came out we were talking about characters, and at that time he was stunning Steve Austin. And Brian Lee was called Primetime Brian Lee, and I guess there was Primetime Deion Sanders, and that's where Brian said he got the primetime from. And I asked him, I said, what is primetime? What is stunning Steve? Why are you stunning Steve? He's got that long, stringy blonde hair, the red Ric Flair robe, and the biker shorts with white boots. It just didn't ring true as stunning Steve. But he had potential. You saw it there. You couldn't help but see he looked great. He stayed in shape. He had a work ethic too, which was really, really undeniable. He wouldn't ask anybody for money. He wouldn't ask for any help per se on that part. He would. You hear the stories about him buying a bag of potatoes to last him a week. He really did that. Potatoes and rice. We were living at a real shithole called the Congress Inn in Nashville, Tennessee, which if you didn't have a crackhead or crack pipe or syringe, they gave you one when you checked in. You know what I mean? It's that kind of shithole. It's a real crap place, but when we saved money, it was like $50 a week, if that tells you anything. And that's where he lived because he was studying the game. He was a student of the game, and you couldn't help but see the potential. But I don't know that anybody back then would have said he's going to be the megastar he became.
But I was booking Memphis. Why, I don't know. See, Memphis used to alternate between Jerry Jarrett booking and Lawler booking. And I don't know what happened, but they were looking for a booker, and Jerry Jarrett wanted to know would I book Memphis for a while. I guess Lawler didn't want to do it, or I don't know. So I'm booking there on a Monday night, and Bill Dundee walks in and he says, hey mate, you know, you got this other guy coming in from Dallas. I said, who? I don't know, some guy's coming in. It was Steve Austin. But Jerry Jarrett didn't tell me that he had booked him. I think that would have been some valuable information to know. So the show started at 8, I guess, supposed to start at 8. This was like 6:45, and all of a sudden, well, you got another guy coming in, you got to put him on the card. Okay. So he walks in, and he was young Steve Austin with the long hair. And he introduced himself, Steve Austin. Okay. What's his real name? Steve Williams. Steve Williams. He introduces himself. And then Lance Russell came in. He was getting a rundown. He said, what are you going to call the new kid, Dutch? I said, oh, wait a minute. I said, what's your name? He said, Steve Williams. I said, well, you can't be Steve Williams here. Why not? That's my damn name. I said, well, we already got a Steve Williams, like Dr. Death Steve Williams. You can't, it's like having two Willie Nelsons. You can't have two of them. He said, well, that's my name. And I'm thinking, you know, this kid just walked in the dressing room about 2 minutes ago. And I'm already in like a debate with him about his name. So, but anyway, I said, well, think of a name, I'll be back. I had to go do something. Then I come back, you got a name? No, I don't have a name. I said, keep thinking, I'll be back. About 5 to 8, he was on first. Lance said, well, what are we going to call the kid? He said, well, Dutch, what are we going to call the kid? I said, I don't know. For lack of a better name, let's call him Steve fucking Austin. Just off the top of my head. He said, like the $6 million man. I said, no, in your case, more like the $6 man. Now get your ass out there. And he went out there and he's been Steve Austin ever since. I just put it off the top of my head. But actually, Steve Austin's a great name for him.
Oh yeah, very fitting. And you spent some time driving to the matches with him. What was he like personality?
Oh, he's great. He's entertaining as hell. And he listened to my philosophy about wrestling. And see, that's where guys learn about the business, was riding with guys who've done it. And he's very likable, very respectful. And if guys are smart, if they ride with somebody that kind of understands what they're doing, if you pick their mind, you'll learn a lot if you just listen.
Well, now you have to watch videos like this because there's no more territories.
No, there's no more territories. That's what I think. When you tell people, well, I used to work here or there or there, what do you mean you used to work there? They don't understand that. They don't. My favorite wrestler of all time. Well, I met 1,000. So I would say Steve Austin, because I helped kind of mentor him in his early years. But if I have to watch somebody, I like to watch him because he's got a good interview and he's entertaining.
The wrestling business, as you know from your background, there is a dance between the promoter or the writer and the talent. And if either one of them are out of step, it don't work. So the balance, the greatest example of that is Vince McMahon and Steve Austin. They would have never been if they hadn't been together and against each other. Wouldn't have worked under any other circumstance. And as you know, it didn't for Steve. You know, he was just mediocre in here and then mediocre in Atlanta. And then when he got to New York and became everyman with Vince McMahon, he set the wrestling world on fire.
So when you worked with Steve, did you have any thoughts on what his potential would be?
No, because see, Steve broke in, Chris Adams and I had a wrestling school in Dallas because I went out to promote that when the Von Erichs were ready to file for bankruptcy. And Steve came to the school and Chris took a liking to him and thought he had potential, and then talked to me into doing the student coach angle and incorporated that with the ex-wife, with Jeannie and Tony. And that clicked because of the story. But then Steve came here and he was, you know, just another wrestler. He was green and never really got over with the fans. And then he went to Atlanta, and boy, it was magic when he went to New York.
I worked with him, I think, one time, and that's what I wanted to get out of it. I think I worked with Steve one time, and then after that I saw what was going on. I went, oh, my knee, because I didn't want to be in a group. When you're in a group, you kind of go down as far as the group, but you always want to be here if you can.
Would you have expected him to go on to the success that he had in those days?
Well, Steve was a good guy, but I never would have thought because it was such an opposite look. I mean, you had a guy stunning Steve with the chick, and he had the long blonde hair, and it was such the opposite. It was almost like a Beach Boy hippie look. It was such the opposite of the shaved head, little goatee, tough guy. I would never have thought that Steve did that, but when he did it, it was great. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons it got over. One, Steve was very good. And when he did that look, for those days, it was kind of a new look of the era. He went through the hippie look, he went through this look, and now you went to a generation where the balder guys were shaving their heads because they didn't want to be bald.
Right.
But he came along at the time when cable television was loosening the rules of broadcasting. He was the first guy that came on television and could say this: I'm gonna catch a beer and I'm gonna kick your ass. He was the first guy that could look tough and that could talk tough. Even when he was saying kick your ass on TV, TBS, TNT, you could not say ass on TV.
Right.
Steve came along at the time when he was the first guy that could really talk like a tough guy and say words you couldn't say on TV before. Those right timing and the right look. And when every once in a while that happens, and now you're in a spot where you're kind of coming down, and I got a guy that's the right time with the right look for down the road.
For Chris Adams, how did you get along with him?
Oh, I got along great with Chris. When before I went to WCW, he was running shows out in Texas, and I went and worked for him a bunch of times. Chris and Tony were great people. I loved Chris. And I'm still friends with Jeannie. You know, his first wife, who then married Steve Austin. You know, I'm still friends with her. As a matter of fact, we just chatted the other day. So, because she's moving, she's moving back to.
Her name Lady Blossom.
Yeah, Lady Blossom. Yeah, she's moving back from England. She's moving, I think, to Las Vegas. So she just wrote a book, and I wrote the foreword to her book. She wrote a book about shattered glass or shattered. Somebody don't get on to me about that because I can't. It's shattered. I think it's the Shattered Glass. Yeah, it's a really great book. Her autobiography is really good.
Oh, that's right, because she was with Chris Adams before Steve Austin.
Yeah, and then Steve. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they have a daughter together. Her and Chris have a daughter together. So.
And Steve Austin, when I listened to the podcast with him and you, he seems like he was a big fan of yours.
Yeah, I know. And that, to me, that's so amazing. And I love it because I heard him on another podcast that he did, and he was talking about my Gucci purse. He said the Gucci purse was the best gimmick at all. You know, that was the best gimmick ever. And I love that. I love that somebody, you know, that's like of Steve Austin's caliber would say that about me. I mean, that makes me feel really, really good.
What did you think of him as a wrestler?
Oh, I thought he was great. I loved him. I mean, when I first met him, I thought he was cool. I mean, but it was also Jeannie came in with him, and I knew Jeannie from World Class, so you know, it was nice that, you know, she was there, and I was like, he's talent, you know. I was like, he's money. That's what I thought about Steve.
Right from the start.
Yeah, right from the start. I was like, that's money.
I personally liked him better as the Stunning Steve character.
Oh, yeah, I loved him as Stunning Steve. Yeah, with the robes and everything. I thought he was really good at that.
I did know him in those days, and I really have to take my hat off to Steve Austin in those days, because when he was working, you know, part of the Hollywood Blondes, when I came into WCW, he was working the loop, going from town to town, doing Broadways with Ravishing Rick Rude. I, became good buddies with Ravishing Rick Rude, but the reason I have more respect for Steve Austin is because he was doing Broadways for the heavyweight championship belt with Ravishing Rick Rude going around, and he had to work with me one night, and Pops, Grizzly Adams, was the agent at the time. And we had to do this match, we had to do this show, and he came and told Steve Austin, Bill Watts was trying to push me over, was trying to, give me a push and everything. So, guys with certain names and stuff like that was putting me over. And Steve was the only guy really that came to me and said, look, we need to go and talk to this agent because this is some bullshit. He goes, I've been doing 20-minute Broadway with Ravishing Rick Rude, and they want me to go out and put you over in 9 minutes. He goes, Scorp, I'm going to have no problem about putting you over in the ring. He goes, but I'm going to be damned if I'm going to go out and put you over in the ring and you've been doing 20-minute Broadways with the champion. So we go back there and talk to the agent. He goes, unlike your partner Bagwell, who every time you got to go and do a job, he goes and complains because he don't want to do the job and he don't want to look bad. You get it switched over where you end up doing the job. And that's where shit starts like, what? Bagwell doing what? But anyways, that's another story. So anyways, we go in the office and he goes and talks to Chris and says, no, look, Chris, I'm going to tell you like this. Scorpio, I don't have no problem about working with Scorpio. I don't have no problem about putting him over in the middle of the ring. 1, 2, 3. He goes, well, I'm going to do it my way. He goes, I've been doing Broadways around with fucking Rick Ravishing Rick Rude, 20-minute Broadways for the belt. And now you want me to go out and put him over 9 minutes? He goes, that's not going to be done. I'm going to do it in my time and X amount of time. And I think we probably went out and probably worked 12, maybe close to 15 minutes, so give or take. And he did the job for me in the middle of the ring, 450 off the top, 1, 2, 3. And that's when, that I said, okay, redneck, no redneck, say what you want to say. I got respect for the man because of the way that he dealt with me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's all that I can say.
And that's when they came up with Brian and Steve for the Hollywood Blondes. So it still worked out for us because we had an incredible team to work with off of it. But the original inception of the Hollywood Blondes was to be me and Brian Pillman.
Oh, okay. That would have been quite something, actually.
Yeah.
And a lot of people remember that feud in WCW from that time. I certainly do, as a fan of WCW. What are some of the highlights of that feud for you?
Oh my God, it was fun. It was just fun. I see kids today, in the back and say, okay, we'll do this and then we do this and then we do this, and they go over it and 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 over it. We never spoke. If we spoke beforehand, it was me. The only person that would speak would be Ricky. He would say, okay, why don't we do something tonight where we work the leg spot, and then like just a general outline of a go home. And the rest was done in the ring. And Brian and Steve's timing was so impeccable, that I used to do the spot where he would beat me up and Irish whip me to the turnbuckle, and I would do a blind turnaround, cross body. Well, when you do that, you can't stop, and you can, but then it loses some of the impact of the move. Every time you do it, no matter who you're doing it with, there's always like your stomach knots up a little bit, like I hope they're there, because you're going blind. Austin, every night I would do that with Austin. He wasn't just in the perfect spot. He was in the perfect spot. He would hit it perfectly, come up off of it perfectly, sell it perfectly. And you just got to a real comfort zone with Brian and Steve because you knew that they were so fluid on their end. The only thing that made tough working with them was that they would get a little bit wrapped up too much into it. Like the one night in Detroit, they had beaten me, and Ricky and I had gone over on them, and they beat us down afterwards. And the out on the match was, or on that segment, was to take our titles and lay them on our chest, like, okay, you may be the champion, but we just whooped your ass, and leave. Instead, they both get wound up, and Steve was with Steamboat, and Brian was with me. They threw the belt busted me and busted my lip open and chipped Ricky's tooth. And I remember watching Brian and Steve walk down the stairs and walking back, and we should still be laying out and selling. Ricky looks at me and he rolls over and he goes, "Let's go, partner." And he jumped right up and he shot down the stairs like 15 feet behind Brian and Steve. And that was the only time I'd ever seen Ricky lose his cool. He's going, "Look at my partner's lip, look at my fucking tooth." And it was uncalled for. But that was because Brian and Steve were inhabiting their characters. They were really living that character, which bled through on camera. No surprise that Steve went on to the greatness that he became in the business, what he ascended to. And I have no doubt that Brian Pillman would have done similar had he not passed away at such a young age.
You were one of the main guys that jumped to WCW, that helped give WCW a lot of credibility when Hogan went over. What led to you jumping ship?
Well, I went with Hulkster, but there was no cut contracts. That was the bottom line. This is the way I feed my family, and with Vince, if you work, you got paid. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. And so I made the move down to WCW, and Boom came down there, and my first month down there, I beat Stunning Steve Austin so bad he had to shave his head and change his name to Stone Cold. I should get a kickback all the money he's making now.
Yeah, you did have a feud with Austin. I believe after that, you started by kind of squashing him on the pay-per-view, and you had a little bit of a feud. At that time, did you have any inkling that he would go on to be a superstar?
No, I don't think anybody saw that coming. You know, from Stunning Steve to Stone Cold, that whole character change, and you know, again, probably one of the top 5 guys ever in the business. But personally, we didn't really get along.
There's a lot of rumors around on the internet and stuff that you and Steve Austin didn't get along. What was your relationship like when you guys were in WCW together?
I was in a booking committee. We put the Hollywood Blondes together. I thought Steve Austin, and I still say this, Steve Austin saved the WWE. Unfortunately, nobody on the booking committee saw Steve Austin. He was Stunning Steve Austin. We didn't see Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, if we did, we certainly made a huge mistake. And I don't think Flair, being the head of the booking committee at the time, would have made that mistake if he thought Steve Austin was going to be what he was. People make mistakes all the time. I remember one time getting on a plane with The Rock, and this is when he was getting booed out of the building. And I said to him, "Hey, I was at your grandfather's second memorial. You guys know how to work. Don't worry about it. Eventually they're going to change." Because he was so charismatic, in my opinion, even when he was in the Nation of Domination. If Austin had came back as Stone Cold and The Rock had came back as Stone Cold, I don't know if they could have taken that barrage. They would have had 2 great performers left, meaning The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. But ours was so stacked with Hogan, Savage, NWO, Rey Mysterio, Guerrero, Malenko, Benoit. Yeah, it goes down the line. I don't think that WWE could have taken that onslaught with just 2. And the other thing was Austin had the best heel at that time to work with, and that was Vince McMahon. And here's something that someone brought up to me, and I forgot about it. Would Vince have done that if Eric Bischoff didn't turn heel? And I gotta give Eric a lot of credit on this. When he turned heel, they powerbombed him through a stage. Yeah, there was batting underneath. But if you've never taken that move, you gotta have a lot of moxie to do it. And Eric did it. And I think that was the catalyst for Vince saying, I'm gonna follow what they're doing.
Were you around when Steve Austin had his little run in ECW?
Yeah, I first started wrestling in ECW. Well, I started appearing in ECW around. I started showing up around like September of '95, and then I went to the then hotel of ECW before we got kicked out. It was called the Travel Lodge, which many of us dubbed the Cylinder of Sin because it was a spherical building, and so many things that happened in that building. You should just put a condom on the building from the roof down just to quarantine it. But the first time I interacted with Steve Austin was at the Travel Lodge, and we went there. You know, I went there to grab Raven and Stevie, and Steve Austin came along for the ride. And being young and stupid and just having a car for the first time, being green with having a car, I kept every spare tire I ever owned in the trunk of my car, because God forbid maybe I get 4 flats at the same time. Who knows? Being young and stupid. So Raven gets in the front seat, Stevie gets in the back, and Austin was like, "Hey, can I throw my bag in your trunk?" And I open it up, and there's like 4 spare tires. He goes, "God damn, kid." So Steve Austin has this big bag, and he squeezes it in the back of my Dodge Aspen, which looked like an undercover cop car at the time, and he's sitting there. I'm like, man, Steve Austin must really hate me right now. But that was my first interaction with Steve Austin, was cramming him in the back seat of my 1977 Dodge Aspen to take him on thank God, a short trip from the Travel Lodge to the ECW arena. But Steve was cool. To this day, Steve Austin's a great guy. He is the same guy, bionic redneck, metalhead, lover of all things cool, and even though he's probably, Steve Austin could easily be on the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, just as being a draw in this business, but he's still the most down-to-earth dude there is, and the wrestling business is better for having him in it, because I know guys who, when I went to the WWE, there's guys who worked for WWE during the Hogan era, and there's guys who worked in WWE during the Steve Austin era, and they said, they compared, what they did, and Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan brought the wrestling business out of the smoky arenas and stuff like that, and brought it to the bright lights. But then, during that, that period of that downtime, when wrestling was really in the lean years, Steve Austin, lit the cannon, and boom, the business exploded, with Steve Austin, and then The Rock, and then Triple H, and the Attitude Era. But, a lot of that Attitude Era came from ECW, and fortunately, Steve Austin was part of both.
If you hadn't been married to Steve Austin, it may never have been Stone Cold Steve Austin, because you were the one that gave him the idea to go with the Stone Cold name. He could have been the Ice Dagger, Frosty McFreeze, or one of those names.
That's such a funny day when those texts came through to the house, because Brian Pillman was on the phone, and it was really funny. We were in hysterics. But basically, Steve actually saw, or we were just flicking channels, and he saw a show about, what was his name now? It was a show on Mafia kind of hitman, Lewinsky or something, anyway. So anyway, he watched the show, and he liked that idea for a character of someone really cold. This show, this guy just went around killing people and sticking them in a freezer, something like that. And that after the office sent all the Ice Dagger, etc. See, me being from England, we think a cup of tea is a cure-all for everything in this country. If you get in a car accident, oh, we'll make you a cup of tea. Oh, I feel really ill. Oh, we'll make you a cup of tea. So it's really common. And me being a big hot tea drinker, Steve used to drink it because he was married to me, and he was sitting on the end of the bed, and he was like, "Oh, I just really don't know." He hated the ringmaster, and I said, "Look, just drink your tea before it gets stone cold." And then that's where I went, "Oh, there you go. There's a good name for you, Stone Cold Steve Austin." And it started kind of him seeing that show, and me drinking tea. So it's kind of cool.
Of course, my deal then was to go and work for the office and write, and that's what I did. And of course, that's where Steve Austin was born. So.
Now, I've heard you say in other interviews that you were one of the ones behind the scenes pushing for Steve Austin.
Oh yeah, I was probably the only one, because Vince didn't think he was the main event guy. Yeah.
And so was the Austin 316, was that just off the cuff?
Yeah, he did that off the cuff, and I was all for it, man. And, the only thing I regret is they didn't do Austin's 10 Commandments. They should have done that. Thou shalt not kill unless thou art pissed. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife unless she's really hot. You know, thou shalt honor thy mother and father unless they're dickheads. You know, right on down the line, you could have sold 1 billion of those shirts.
You mentioned Steve Austin. I know you're friends with him, but where do you think his place in history is in wrestling? And I think you wrestled him too, didn't you?
Well, I've wrestled Steve and worked with him at the school I had in Lima, Ohio, and he's an awesome individual. I can't say enough good things about Steve. And you know, as far as his place in history, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, he's right up there. There's not many that could be much bigger than Steve Austin. He really completely, single-handedly revitalized wrestling in the late 90s and early 2000s. If it had not been for Steve and Vince McMahon, we would not have enjoyed the boom that we had at that time, you know? And that was, again, he was the catalyst that created that crossover and made it such a mainstream phenomenon.
And Steve Austin, you're well remembered for your matches with him, and you fought him on the SmackDown main event on one of the episodes of SmackDown when it was hitting ratings peaks. Any memories of working with him?
Yeah, working with Austin was a challenge in intensity once again. It goes back to you know, the intensity of Chris Benoit. If it came to matching someone's intensity with Chris Benoit, definitely Stone Cold Steve Austin would be up there. Getting in the ring with Steve Austin was a test in cardio. It was one of those things where even with Benoit, for some reason, I would never blow up working with Benoit, even though we would be going 100 miles an hour. With Austin, for some reason, it was one of those things where by the end of the match, I was blown sky high. And I loved working Austin. The intensity was there. I don't think the intensity was any more than it would be with Chris Benoit, but for some reason, I always seemed a lot more blown up by the time I was done a match with Austin. You know, I don't know whether it had a lot more to do with facials and expressions inside the ring combined with professional. I'm not sure exactly why I was blown up more with Austin than I was with Benoit, but there was a significant difference in how much energy I was using working with Austin than I was working with Benoit.
And I've heard Steve didn't have a big ego for the star that he was in those days. Is that true from what you experienced?
Yeah, I don't think Steve had too much of an ego at all. I think he was there to make money, and he was there to work hard, and that's what he did. I think he did an incredible job, really garnering the attention of the fans, the respect of the fans, and of course, you know, putting asses in the seats and selling tickets benefited all of us.
I like Steve. I liked him in the ring. I liked him on his interviews, and he was almost take off of me. You know, I mean, people always say that. You know.
Oh yeah.
But Steve is, you know, he's a good guy. I mean, I love the way he does this broken skull wrench, you know. I always wanted to call him, well, I want to come try that, Steve. No, just like MMA and pro wrestling. I won't make it through the first one.
Working with Stone Cold, who was the one that told you you'd be doing that character with Stone Cold?
Let me think. Well, they put me on the road, and I was traveling with Renee, Rob Conway, Garrison, Cade on Raw. I'm doing house shows.
Renee Dupree?
Yeah, and dark matches. And I'm trying to remember how they presented that, man. It was in Chicago. Stone Cold had gotten kicked out of the arena. I think Bischoff had put him out the building. And I was standing outside, and excuse me, the gist was like, I went up to talk to him as a starstruck fan, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, Stone Cold, I mean, my dream is to try to make it in wrestling, you know? And I was like, I bought a ticket to come to the show tonight. He's like, oh, you have a ticket? He's like, come over here, let me talk to you. So basically, he sweet talked me and getting my ticket to get back in. And the next week, I don't actually remember who gave the idea.
Were you excited? Because he was just coming off his big run.
Yeah, man. Well, Stone Cold's one of my favorites, and that was Raw, so it's live, man. It's like, you know, stress, bro. You know, like, okay, we're going live. Don't screw this up. And the next week, we did another backstage deal where I gave him the tape to try to look at, petition for a chance, you know. And then I think the following week, I got my tryout match, I think from him or the general manager, with Hurricane against La Resistance. And it was in a military town, like, I forget where it was, where they have an army base. It was all military around. And it was cool because La Resistance was hated, you know?
Yeah.
And we beat them up, and I went and got the American flag, you know, and everybody was happy. So it was awesome debut, you know, with the Hayden, you know, that was John Heidenreich, actually. Yeah. I didn't have any intro music. I had some generic stuff that Paul Heyman's like, that's terrible, we got to change that. And they made that Heidenreich song, which was killer. But
Heyman was a writer back then?
Yeah. Well, when I went to SmackDown, he was like, when they reinvented me, he was like, we're gonna get rid of this whole John Heidenreich thing, you know. So
what happened, like, with that? First of all, you had this gimmick. And
I wrestled them, and I actually did a mixed tag with me and Trish against Victoria and Steeda Richards. That match went well. That was on Raw, and we won. And then I'm trying to think, I did several things with Hurricane. You know, backstage, things that were funny.
Like they were going to push you.
Yeah, Hurricane with Rosie. Remember, he was the reporter guy, you know? Because he was a superhero in training, which we won't say what it stands for, but...
Yeah.
Right? But, and actually what happened, I remember I injured my quad. I got a hematoma, and this sounds crazy, because normally it's a thigh bruise from, like, something hitting you. Pretty violent impact, which forms, it can be really bad, you know. I actually went, I was in a match with Hurricane, I think maybe, or something, and I went to go over the top rope, and my leg just, as I went over, I got like stuck and didn't go completely, and I just rolled down the rope on my thigh, and believe it or not, that force of that rope ended up, by the end of that show that night, I couldn't walk. My leg is swollen. I thought I had broke my leg. It hurt so bad.
So people that don't know, it hurts even just hitting the ropes.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, you got to develop all your body parts to take that impact. You know, that was just this example of when you hit that rope wrong. It basically gave me like a hematoma, like you get in football from a guy hitting you with his helmet.
Yeah.
Because that's what ended my push right there, because I couldn't walk. I had to go to therapy at Tulane Rehab, Tulane University. And that was like 4 weeks. I couldn't walk for like 2 weeks. You know, my legs swole. They took extras because it wasn't broken, but I was unable to wrestle because I couldn't bend my leg. So that, man, I was very frustrated because I was like, oh my God, I hope they don't fire me, you know. I don't want to be gone very long because it's just not good in wrestling to be getting paid and not being productive. But anyway, that ended that little Johnny thing, because I had done a lot of vignettes, like stuff with Trish Stratus, where when Jericho and her were doing a deal where she's like, oh, don't worry about, he's like, yeah, Heidenreich's crazy, man. You shouldn't trust that guy. She's like, oh, don't worry about little Johnny. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, he showed me little Johnny, you know, like, he's like, that's wonky, man, that guy, you know. So the thing was getting, we were getting vignettes and in-ring stuff with that, but that injury was what, you know, sidelined that.
What was your involvement in changing Stone Cold Steve Austin from the ringmaster to his developing into the Stone Cold character?
Well, bro, I got to be honest with that. I mean, you know, you gotta give credit where credit is due, and that was all Steve. And you know that's the thing that just it just pisses me off, because people don't have a clue and they weren't there. And I was a fan of Stunning Steve Austin at WCW. Right. I
still prefer that character, actually, believe it or not.
I never saw Austin's work at ECW. I never saw it, but I loved Stunning Steve Austin. I knew the guy could talk. And I'll never forget when he was hired, you know, Vince would call me in the office and he'd give me like a blueprint of, okay, like these are who these characters are, and I would have to develop the characters. Right. And I remember Vince looked me in the eye and he said to me, Steve Austin is to never open his mouth. Ted DiBiase is to cut all his promos. And I remember looking at him, and when he said that, I knew Vince didn't have a clue of who Stunning Steve Austin was. The fact that you don't want this guy to talk, like, bro, like, seriously? So I now had to go to Steve, and I said, Steve, listen, bro, this is the mandate Vince has given me. I said, I don't agree with it. I says, it's what he wants. So basically, Steve said to me, Vince, you got to find a way for me to talk. You got to give me an opportunity. You got to give me a chance. So I remember I was writing a show. I don't remember if it was with Ed or not, but there was an opportunity to put Austin as the ringmaster on headsets during a match. And we put Austin on color during the match and let Austin talk, and right there, Austin 316 was born. Stone Cold. Bro, this guy took literally 3 minutes on color to become a millionaire. I mean, it was 3 minutes. And he took those 3 minutes and he owned those 3 minutes. It was all him, and Stone Cold Steve Austin was born from there.
Was he pretty easy to work with?
He was a little difficult, bro, and I'll tell you why. You got to understand, Steve came through the ranks, man, and he was always, really a mid-carder at best. Once he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, he skyrocketed like that. And I know there was always a part of Steve that kind of, in the back of his mind, when he finally achieved this greatness, and in the back of his mind, I knew he thought, I could lose this just as quickly as I got it. So when we would write for him, he would really look at everything through a fine-tooth comb. I mean, really analyze it and rip it apart and put it back together. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can find a problem wrong with any script if you want. You can find a problem wrong with anything. And I think at times, because of his, I think he was a little paranoid of going backwards. And I don't blame him, because he was so hot at the time. If the writing and the creative didn't match how hot his character was, he would have taken steps backwards. So I think sometimes he might have overanalyzed things to a fault. But I think over time, when we did some of the great stuff we did with him, I think, we really, really earned his trust. And as time went on, it just became easier and easier.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.